Hello everyone, bringing you a video today considering the kit of an Irish soldier serving on internal security duties in Ireland, the late 1980s. Specifically, this is based on footage from the RTE archives, which I highly recommend people go and have a look at. There's some really interesting news reports and so forth on there, covering security operations in Donegal in 1987. And the troops in that instance are supporting police, the Garda, in search operations, searching the countryside for weapons caches and so forth. And this was quite a common role for the Irish Army at this time, as well as border security duties, was providing military assistance to the civil power in these internal security operations, which were obviously all part and parcel of the Troubles. And the kit we have on the mannequin here is fairly typical of an Irish infantryman of this time period. One thing that's missing is body armour. Certainly on border duties, body armour was worn, basically the US three-quarter collar body armour with a specific Irish cover, which I don't have an example of. It was made in cotton and is visually distinct from the nylon covers used by both British and US forces using the three-quarter collar body armour. We don't have that on the mannequin here. As I say, looking at the footage this was based on, they weren't worn in this particular instance, so we just have the combat jacket and so forth here. Without further ado, we'll start looking at the kit we have on the mannequin here, and this also fits in quite nicely with the 1958 pattern videos I've been making, in that this is a good example of non-UK forces using 1958 pattern, British-made 1958 pattern, with some specific details to Irish service, which we'll talk about as we look at the mannequin in more detail. Starting at the top here, we of course have the Auralite helmet. And this is an Israeli design which had been introduced by the Irish Defence Forces in the 1980s, the mid-1980s. And this is fitted with a helmet net, as you can see here, which in this instance has been secured using tape. It was also common to see rubber bands used as well to secure the helmet net over the helmet. Very typical of Irish service at this time. At the neck here we do have a scrim scarf worn, not universal, but some of the men in the footage this is based on were wearing them, so I've included that here. We then also have the Irish combat smok, and this is an updated design introduced in the 1980s, but based on the preceding pattern which had been in use, which was essentially the British 1960 pattern. And this draws quite a few features from that, the preceding design in Irish use, in having the stitched collar here, the big tab which allows that to be secured around the neck, and then one major difference is the vertical chest pockets here, which are closed with a heavy duty brass zip. This has been covered in more detail in a previous video, so I won't go into too much detail on that here. There is a video covering this on the channel. One further thing I will mention with the combat uniform, compared to other nations' combat uniform introduced around this time period, it's very heavyweight, heavy duty and hard wearing, and a very high quality. And certainly in comparison to British combat uniform of the time period, the 1984 pattern, it's streets ahead in terms of manufacturing quality and design, really. Moving on to talk about the web equipment, this is British 1958 pattern web equipment procured for the Irish Defence Forces. It's essentially the standard British setup this time period with only minor modifications. You can see the yoke, the straps coming down to the front here. We have the third issue ammunition pouches, in British service at least. These seem to be the most common issued to Irish forces. And then you obviously have the standard 1958 pattern belt here. One modification which seems quite common in Irish service is an addition of a set of the clips. Now these are from the equipment they used on the pack and also on the cape carrier. But in this instance they've actually been removed from those components and added onto the front of the yoke here, so that you no longer loop the straps for the yoke through the loops on the back of the pouches here. You just have the clip and clip those through the loops on the back of the pouches. Something which turns up a lot in photograph of Irish forces, and as I say, something I've replicated here as a point to illustrate there. That's the front of the mannequin. We'll start moving this around now and have a look at some of the other details. Looking at the right hand side of the mannequin here, you can see the rank insignia on the arm here. No other insignia is worn in this instance, we just have the rank insignia, and you can see there that's for a 3-star private, essentially private first class. We lift the arm out of the way here, you can see a little bit more detail of the web equipment. We've got the ammunition pouch here, which obviously has the Energa pouch on the side there, a redundant feature by this point, both in British and indeed in Irish service. And then at the rear there, you can see the rear pouches. One other thing to just mention here, we're talking about the ammunition pouch. Of course, the standard arm of the Irish Defence Forces at this time period was the FN FAL. Its box magazines, of course, well compatible with 1958 pattern, which had been designed with the L1A1 self-loading rifle in mind. Essentially the magazines are the same dimensions. Another weapon of course in use was the Carl Gustaf submachine gun. Magazines for that can be carried in these, but the leather pouch looked at in previous videos was often also carried to give additional ammunition capacity. So that's the right hand side of the mannequin here. Looking at the back of the mannequin here, you can see the equipment is worn in somewhat stripped down configuration. You don't have the cape carrier in this instance, and obviously the pack and so forth isn't carried. That's something that will be covered in a future video, perhaps looking at Irish forces on exercise. But we just have the rear pouches here, the two rear pouches at the back there. Of course, these are conjoined, would carry things like the mess tins and so forth in there. As I say, otherwise the equipment has been somewhat stripped down in the removal of the cape carrier from the back there, which would be the other most common bit of kit to carry on the rear of the equipment. And finally, looking at the left hand side of the mannequin here, you can see rank badges are worn on both arms, and you can see some details of the combat Smok here as well, the reinforcement piece on the elbow, the button cuff. If we lift this out of the way, you can see here the water bottle pouch. Now in Irish service, certainly in photographs, the first issue water bottle pouch with the twist lock on the flap there rather than the strap seems to be the most common. Not entirely sure why that is. The second pattern was around by the time Irish forces introduced 1958 pattern, but nevertheless this seems to be the most common pattern of water bottle pouch in Irish service. Just a point to note there looking at this. So there you are. I hope you found it interesting looking at this. As I said at the start of the video, I highly recommend going and having a look on the RTE archives, freely available online, and there's some really useful information in there. It's very interesting to go and have a look at these reports of the time period and obviously how things were reported, and obviously there's a lot of good footage in there as well of both sides of the border. There's quite a few reports on things that were going on in Northern Ireland at the time as well, so it's a very useful resource in that regard. As I say, the details of the kit on the mannequin here, I hope it's been interesting looking through these. It's been nice putting this together because I've been interested in Irish kit ever since first becoming aware of it, looking through Osprey books and things when I first started collecting militaria, certainly in terms of the troubles and security duties within the Republic of Ireland as well. And then of course that spun on to interest in UN deployments and things as well. But this is the sort of thing that initially interested me when I first started reading up about Irish forces. So it's been nice to put this together. If you have found this interesting and you'd like to see more from the channel, please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, little notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And as ever, a huge thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. It's greatly appreciated, as I always say. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below, and of course there will be photographs of this posted up over there as well. If you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is an email address down in the description as well. That's everything for this video, so until next time, bye for now.